Hey there, welcome to your Positive Energy Recharge. I am Jade Sterling, your woman's health nurse and coach. I'm here to help you to balance your hormones, master your emotions, and live a life you love. And today I'm telling you part 2 of my story, which I hope that some of you who watched the first story felt like it was a torch to shine a light in a dark place that helped you, through my personal transformation, be able to identify some parts of yourself that could help heal or move forward in your life. That's the only reason why I'm here telling my story. I ended up, of course, blowing out way longer than I anticipated, and I felt like I needed to wrap it up in a bow and just present it, bring you full circle to where I am today. And in thinking about this, I realized that, wow, how do you just wrap your life up in 2 hours? You just can't. And I was listening to someone else telling their own story not too long ago, which actually inspired me to do this. And she actually told it over 4 episodes, and they were an hour and a half each. So what does that make it, like 6 hours? And I thought, look, what I actually am here to do is to highlight for you how your thoughts create your experience of your life, but also how the biology of our hormones affect that, but how our psychology of our thinking can impact and actually create experiences that give us more control, more centered and calm approaches to living our lives. So, just to backtrack a little bit so you have a little bit more of a context that I kind of just glided over towards the end of the last video, was that my mum, when we got to Foster Tuncurry, so I talked about how I was born in Melbourne, we moved to the Blue Mountains, we ended up in Foster Tuncurry in the mid-north coast with my mum, who's a single mum, and my sister. And I think I was 11 or 12 years old and she was diagnosed with Ross River fever. And it was a difficult time. I remember having times where I was helping her come out of the bath because she was stuck. She was in so much pain, she couldn't move. I remember times where she couldn't get out of bed. I remember doing the grocery shopping and paying the bills. And this is just really to highlight too how when I came to the end of my schooling and I had the choice between being a brain surgeon or being an actor, I chose to be an actor. And I look back and I think I needed to be light. I needed to heal, and I needed to choose something that helped me be in my body as well as my head, not just my head, because I'd been in my head for pretty much my whole life. Having said that, of course, I found acting to be a very deep experience that put me on a different trajectory of life that was obviously exactly what I needed and where I needed to go. But it was during that time that my mum was really unwell that she started looking for alternatives. And this was the foundation for me having a bit more of an open, broader mind that helped me also be aware of alternatives and opportunities just in life in general. I'm really grateful to my mum. She was an extraordinary human and she didn't even know it. So during this time she was really unwell. She started doing yoga, which wasn't really heard of at that time. She started meditating, which again also wasn't really common or mainstream. She started bringing home books like Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra. She was really into Shirley MacLaine. And these were all very new concepts. They were leaders at the time who were at the forefront of the thought work movement, which really now we kind of know. We talk about how our thoughts create our reality and people go, yeah, we kind of know that. We've done a lot more science, a lot more research, but it's the application of that that is still being looked at. And this is what I have chosen to specialize in as I have continued in the course of my journey. So the first book I read full length from cover to cover was Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, which taught me that my thoughts are creating my physical reality and that my body is going to be the catalyst for how I experience my life. And that's how I lived my life. I was fortunate enough to have conversations with Mum about meditation, about how we feel on the inside, about our emotions and how they show up in our bodies, and how when we're run down we might get a cold, or our body's telling us to stop, or an injury might not be a bad thing because it's actually just our body trying to help us recalibrate. so many things that I'm grateful for that perspective for. And it was just a part of my childhood, my upbringing. And it went into the acting career that I was able to then have and go and successfully have for 10 years, where I just worked continuously. But I remember getting to a point in that career where I was talking to people more and more about their health. And this is what I was talking about too in the other video, where I got to a point where my own health was deteriorating rapidly. And this was a culmination of the industry that I was in. Basically, you had to fit into a mold if you wanted a particular job or role or direction. You were told what you should look like. You were told how you should feel. You were told how you should show up. And that wasn't serving me at that time. There are lots of people who defy that mold and still are able to be successful, but there's also lots of people who aren't. And there's also lots of people in the industry who just are that without even trying. So it completely depends on who you are. And for me, it wasn't working. And I've talked about this before, where I've sometimes claimed and declared that I had an eating disorder as a result of being in this industry, whereas over the years I've come to decide that it wasn't a disorder as such. I didn't have to make it such a big issue and put it in a box and make this my own. It's actually just that at the time I was confused. I didn't know what I know now. And I can look back and think, oh, there's so many things about my life I didn't know back then, what I know now. But now that I know, I don't have to be so hard on myself to say I had this issue that was disordered and there was something wrong with me. It's like, I just didn't have all the information and I was confused. So from Tungurri, my beautiful life growing up, to Sydney and my acting degree, failing, being kicked out, to my amazing job at Australia's Wonderland, to traveling the world with entertainment companies and production companies, to coming back and working in Sydney again, to London, where I ended up working in a dance studio, doing my own performing work, but also working in a natural therapies clinic as the manager there, which was really like my pivotal moment of opening up that, oh, I could maybe even do both. I could be a performer and be a healer, and really wanted to incorporate those somehow. But as my health deteriorated personally, I came back to Australia to visit my sister, and she packaged me up and shipped me off to a Vipassana meditation retreat. 10 days, sitting on your bottom, doing this particular technique. And it was there that I realized I wanted to make some drastic changes in my life, which I did. I decided that health was more worthwhile. My health, and it was a good dharmic work to do to help other people. And it would fulfill my life and support me to just do the real work, which is meditate and do yoga. Along this path, I met my partner, who at the time was also going through a big transitional change of identity, was doing environmental science, obsessed with soils and compost, which he still is, and going down that track and discovering that part of himself. Met me. We decided for the first year of our lives that we weren't looking for a relationship, thank you very much, but you're cool to hang out with and I really like you, so let's just keep hanging out until we don't want to hang out anymore. I remember a year later, we were still hanging out and we were living together in a place that was just down the road from the uni that we were both attending. I was doing naturopathy and he was doing environmental science. And we were both practicing very intently Vipassana meditation, and I had started yoga teacher training with my beautiful yoga teacher who I had just opened my eyes, my heart, my body to a deeper experience of physical hatha yoga at the time. Didn't really know what I was doing, but I thought I did at the time. More to come. And this was really fulfilling. This was really worthwhile. And after 12 months of being together, my partner and I were like, oh, you're still here. And I really enjoyed having a life with you. What would it be like if we were to keep going and do this and actually create a life together? And that shifted the dynamic again. At the same time, my sister, who was living here too, had her first baby. But I have to say, at that time where she came home with her baby. I remember visiting her. She was breastfeeding. Her husband was there, beautiful human. And I remember it was probably the first time I had a real panic attack, and I didn't know it at the time. But I remember thinking, if I had a baby, I wouldn't know what the heck to do. I wouldn't have a clue. And this caused me great anxiety. Now, I'd always had anxiety about having children. I remember going and seeing a psychic once. I was about 19, living in Sydney. And she said, oh, it's all, your life is going to be completely impacted by your daughter who is going to be born. And she's going to change your life forever. And I remember, that wasn't a panic attack, but I remember going home and crying my eyes out with the anxiety that I was going to have a daughter. Having said that, I had 2 sons, but I had 2 miscarriages, and one quite late in my pregnancy. Who knows whether that would have been my daughter that completely changed my life, but that's another story to tell. So at this time, I realized that if I wanted to maybe get married to this person, and maybe even at another time have a family with this person, but we were both like, no. I'd have to really meditate deeply and strongly, and I'd need a good, solid, stable job that would provide some kind of security for all of us. So in that process, working with my yoga teacher, who was also a registered nurse, that really was, and another movie that came into my life, of course it's always movies, The Constant Gardener. I think it was Ralph Fiennes in that movie. Somebody tell me in the comments below. I remember watching that, and that's got nothing to do with nursing, but they go and they help people in developing countries. And I thought, well, that I could do. I can't go there with my herbs and my yoga and my meditation. That's my thought at the time. Though now I'm like, why couldn't I have done that? But anyway, but I can go with medicine, and I can go as a nurse, and I can go to heal wounds and do things that's a bit more practical and actually helps people. I'm going to do nursing. What? And everyone in my sphere of life was shocked and absolutely dumbfounded by it. What? You're going from acting to naturopathy. Was like, wow, enough. But we know you, and you're kind of into the alternative side of things. But like nursing, that just seems totally what? And one day I explained to my partner, this is what I want to do. And he thought about it. He listened to me very attentively. The next day he says to me, I think I want to do nursing too. I'm like, what? He said, you're into soils and plants, like not humans and body fluids. And he said, but I heard everything that you said, and it makes perfect sense. And it's a good path to move forward. And I think that we can do it together. And so everyone in our lives thought that we were absolutely insane, including us really, but it was a lovely life. Then we applied for university actually in Lismore, which was a 3-year degree, and someone said, did you know there's a fast-track 2-year degree in Launceston in Tasmania? Well, then people really thought we were crazy, especially my sister who just had a baby, and I was leaving her. But in my mind I was like, I'm leaving you so I can come back and I can be useful. That's how I thought in my mind. She ended up moving away as well, and her husband, who had just finished his teaching degree, they went off and they had a little adventure down in the snowy mountains down south. And then they came back to Lismore too. But sometimes you might not even be sure why you're making certain decisions. But in my mind, I kind of look back and think, oh my God, you just had a baby and I left. I wasn't much support. She left too in the end. But my thought was, I'm no help to anyone right now because all I want to do is meditate and do yoga, and that's all internal. I need to be helpful in the world, and to be able to support myself if I choose to do what you're doing, which I cannot even imagine that I'm doing right now. So we went to Tasmania, nuts that we were. And I remember there still doing a lot of healing. I was angry a lot. I cried a lot. And I meditated a lot. And at the end of 2 years, we got through it. I was just so cold. And I said to my partner, I just want to go back to Lismore where I can wear bare feet and be in the climate, and maybe even still have some way of incorporating natural therapies into nursing that we're doing, because right now in that particular field that we were in that sphere, it wasn't a possibility. So they were looking to build a Vipassana meditation center, of which my husband and I were both, he wasn't my husband at the time, but we were both so dedicated to that path in the area where we had just left in Lismore. So that became the no-brainer. Let's move back there. Now, to sort of give you a bit of a wrapping it up as to where we went to from there, we went back to Lismore. We got jobs as nurses. We bought a property. We got married. We fell pregnant, and we were part of trying to build this Vipassana meditation center, which was 3 years of our lives. It did not go through. That is a whole other story in itself. And our Vipassana community that we had, everyone dispersed and disbanded from the area, and suddenly I was very, very pregnant with our first child. So right on the cusp of having our first child, I was already in a place where I was a little bit disoriented. I'd left my job because I didn't want to just take leave because I had no idea how I was going to be. They were trying to get me to take leave. Say, look, just take some leave and then you'll have, but then I would have had to have come back in 3 to 6 months. And I thought, I don't know if I can do that. So I just quit. And my husband took on extra work and was working full time. And we couldn't then really manage the property that we were living on. So we decided it was easier to move back into town. And so we're living in town in a different place. I'm very, very pregnant. The Vipassana community had gone. The centre wasn't being built. We were both feeling a little bit lost right before that anyway. But then the baby was born and it changed our lives forever. We didn't know how to be. We didn't know what to do or how to show up, even though they try and prepare you. My mum then, I don't know where I was up to in her story back in the last video, but she ended up moving to Lismore right when I was very fully, heavily pregnant with baby number one. And she was really struggling physically with her health. Her rheumatoid had come back. She was still trying to work. She still had to support herself. She wasn't actually eligible for a disability pension or anything like that, even though we tried for her. Anyway, it was a whole story, and she was just trying to get by herself. And then mentally, she was having waves of up and down as her physical health started to deteriorate. Her story is another story that I'm not going to go into at this time, but it was a difficult time. And when I had my first baby, she wasn't able to help a lot. And I didn't know what I was doing. My sister by this stage had 3 beautiful girls, and she was very much into attachment parenting, which I thought was just not for me, because I had made the decision that my sister was a very different person to me anyway, so that probably wasn't going to be the way I did things. But each step of the way, I found that I felt safer carrying my baby. I felt safer sleeping with my baby. I felt safer just being really involved and breastfeeding and not having any separation at all and not going back to work. But it was, of course, a bumpy ride, and transitioning from having no children, and then my husband and I for a long time there were like, no, we're not going to have any. We just wanted to give service to our Vipassana community, meditate, do yoga, and give service to other people, that gift of yoga and meditation. Suddenly, we felt like it was the right thing to have a child. And so this was even a big shift that was happening mentally as well. But also, nobody taught me about hormones. Nobody told me about hormones and how they play a role when you have a baby, prenatally, postnatally. It makes me laugh because I think, how are we not talking about hormones? We're talking about the physicality of growing a baby. We talk about what it's going to look like, how your baby, is your baby going to sleep in the room with you or out of the room? Is your baby going to breastfeed or feed from the bottle? Is you going to carry your baby, have your baby in a pram? We talk about all the things we're going to do with our baby, but we don't actually talk about the biology of, oh, if you breastfeed your baby, you're going to have oxytocin. Carrying your baby also stimulates oxytocin. These are all hormones that coat the nerve cells of your nervous system, and they make you be able to cope with not having sleep or broken sleep or ill health or emotional ups and downs. You will survive because your body has got hormones on board to be able to support you to do that. Nobody told me these things, but also there are other things involved there, that your progesterone might spike, your progesterone might completely drop, your estrogen will be non-existent for a period of time. You might not be able to regulate and dial down your nervous system effectively, and you might feel like you're just awake all the time. That was my experience of having my first baby. I'm not going to go into the whole birth story. He ended up being an emergency cesarean. I was very fortunate, and I have nothing but gratitude about that experience. because all I wanted was a healthy baby on the other side, and that's what I got. Nothing wrong with him whatsoever. And because I was really healthy myself at the time, I healed very quickly from my cesarean. So I remember my first baby being my first baby was amazing, but I was very emotionally up and down. And I remember the first time I realized that what I was experiencing was anxiety. Just having that understanding was the first part of my healing. I couldn't understand why when he was away from me, I felt like I wanted to throw up. I couldn't understand that when he was crying, that everything inside of me hurt. I couldn't understand that not being able to sleep was normal, but that my hormones were going to make sure that I was going to be okay. I didn't know that. So I had this constant underlying anxiety that was building and building and building. And I think this was probably the second time I had my first real panic attack. I was sitting outside with my baby and my husband picked him up and took him inside. I can't even tell you why. My whole body freaked out. And I remember having a moment going, what is wrong with me? And even my husband coming out and saying, what is wrong with you? Like, chill out, like just dial it down. No, we couldn't understand it. And then I had this moment of awareness where I'm like, oh, this is anxiety. This is panic. And saying it out loud was gone. It was still there underlying, very, very gently, softly vibrating. But when I knew what it was, oh, I'm just not coping. This is panic, this is anxiety. It sort of brought me to. It brought me to enough that made me realize that I needed to look after myself, I needed to chill out, I needed to educate myself, I needed to probably even, we ended up moving because I thought I needed different space, I needed a different environment. I just decided that my nervous system was the ultimate priority, and I just went all in with that for myself and for my baby and for my husband. Things didn't really turn out the way that I wanted them to, but they turned out the way that they were supposed to. And the first year, I got to the end of the first year of my baby's life, and I remember thinking, I survived. After that, I was fine. And I was like, we should have 10 of these. I remember running into a neighbor when my baby was 3 months old, and she had two babies, two toddlers, and she was saying, oh, I love your baby. Your baby's 3 months old. I'm getting really clucky for my third. And I remember thinking, you're insane. You are completely on a different wavelength to me. One for me is going to be more than enough, because I was in the state of panic and anxiety. When I got through that, it was like I had conquered an extreme sport after that first year. And I thought, oh my God, we definitely have to do this again. Suddenly I was like, let's have another baby. And my husband's like, what? You've been a mess for 12 months. And I was like, no, but we got through it. And we need to have another one. Like, it just, again, this is a cultural thing, I'm sure, in many ways. But also a physical, bodily thing that I had never, ever felt prior to having my first baby. Having my first baby was an intellectual decision. This is what I'm going to do. But after having him, I used to get feelings that started in my toes, and they would come all the way up to the center of my chest and explode out my heart when I would see babies. And I would be like, I need to have another one of those. I cannot explain that feeling. I never had that before. But I was having those sensations 12 months after having our first baby. And I got through, and I became an Australian Breastfeeding Association counsellor. I did breastfeeding education certificate in order to do that. I did women's health certificate for nursing. I started to do a lot of training, a lot of studying, because this is how I learn. I need to learn first in my brain and then experientially experience it. I mean, we're all like this, but it just works in different ways for different people. And then I was on a trajectory to, oh my gosh, we have to educate women about their hormones and how that affects their bodies. And then I started looking into the psychology of it. But at that stage, I was heavily pregnant with baby number 3. I was going to say, in the middle there, I lost 2 babies, actually. One before my first and then one after my first. And then by the time I was pregnant with baby number 4, there was 3 years difference between my eldest and my youngest. And I got there too, and I decided to stop. because I thought I've got 2 healthy babies. Why do we need to keep going? Even though I totally could have kept going, but not at the same time, because baby number 2 was even harder. Baby number 2, I did have a lot of grief with the loss of baby number 3, because I was probably halfway through my pregnancy and had the miscarriage. And I can talk about it now. It's obviously not able to talk about these things at the time, but I look back and I remember thinking, well, I wasn't ready. And perhaps that psychic was right, that was my daughter that was going to change my life, because that is when I realized that I needed the psychology on board to help with what was happening with me biologically. And that was the bit that my mum was missing. There was like 2 camps. We look at mental health, we look at physical health, but even mental health, we kind of just like move it over there. We're looking at it more and more, but it's still isolated to what's happening in the physical body. And I just don't understand that. Having grown up with Louise Hay, who said, well, it's all in here. Second baby, very pregnant, home birth, VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean, completely different life-changing experience. But I remember thinking, I don't need to go through that again, because mentally it was very, very difficult. It was obviously my first normal vaginal birth, but at the same time, I didn't understand how to feel safe in my body, supporting myself with what I was thinking. So I remember getting through it though and thinking that, wow, that was an amazing experience and I'm amazing, and it was a good experience. But I remember also thinking, I'm not going to choose to do that again. And even when I had those moments where I had the feeling coming up and into my heart that I wanted to have another baby, thought about it a little bit, and I remember thinking, well, I might not choose to do the home birth in the same way, knowing of course that a second home birth would be a completely different experience. But also from the postnatal experience with my second child that came into the world, I decided that I might not be benefiting myself to have another baby anyway. And that is because when he came, I remember getting to about 4 weeks and thinking that I was hemorrhaging. I was actually having a period, as it turned out. I started tracking it. I was like, wow, this is actually a period. But I remember it was that same underlying feeling of anxiety that I had. That was the same with my first, but I managed to get through my first somehow. With difficulty, I look back and I think, but at the same time, he was actually obviously much easier, because with the second, this baby, my second baby, was even an easier baby than my first, if that really is possible, because they were both very easy, good babies. Are good. What is a good baby? Well, I hate using those words, but they were easy to manage babies, and they basically, I mean, the first one had issues sleeping at night, but there was a whole bunch of other psychological issues there for myself that I realized that I was actually keeping him awake in some ways because of my anxiety, and then it got him into patterns. But again, we were able to sort it out and settle in. Certainly when I realized I was having anxiety about it all, and I tried to keep this in mind for my second baby, and with my period came a panic attack. And I remember being at the back and going, oh, okay, this is a panic attack. This is panic. This will pass. 90 seconds an emotion will last in your body before it moves. And I knew this by now, but I remember it doesn't make it any less scary. And I remember thinking that I was going to die. So I'm in the backyard. My husband's actually in the house with the baby. I'm breathing, trying to get through, just thinking, just got to get through this horrible feeling. It passed just to more of a low-level anxiety, and I started to say it out loud. But I was really struggling, and then that night I couldn't sleep at all. But it was more like I had stuck my finger in a PowerPoint. There was a buzzing, or you know when you're under a fluorescent light that's like zzz, 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 and it's just, that's what my brain felt like. And I thought, oh my God, I'm really not coping. What I didn't mention about my first pregnancy too is that I had some blood tests through a doctor that I went looking for to help me in ways that was going to be complementary to my lifestyle and my choices that I wanted to make. And he tested my zinc serum levels and found out they were very, very low, and that actually impacts our mental health and our nervous system. When he put me on a zinc supplement, that is when that low level anxiety kind of dissipated, dispelled, and then eventually disappeared completely. But of course, it was a whole process of the 12 months and the hormones and all the rest of it, but the zinc definitely helped me. So here I am, second baby, feel like the finger stuck in a PowerPoint, having like absolute fireworks going off in my brain and in my body, and not knowing what the heck is going on. Went back to my doctor, and he said, "Oh, it must be again. It must be your zinc level. Let's go looking for your zinc." But then, for some reason, I didn't go back to him because I couldn't get to him, because he was actually, I started seeing him. He's an hour away from where I live, and I couldn't get back to him. So I went and saw a local doctor in my local town here and said to her, "This is what I need. I need these zinc levels checked. I need these bloods. I need this. I need that." And she said to me, "No, you're just looking for a reason why you're not coping." And I thought, well, maybe I am. And I started to cry. And she said, "This is dysphoria. You have some kind of dysphoria going on here." And I thought, well, yeah, dysphoria is not able, like dysfunctional mood. Yeah, I can't sleep. I have so much anxiety. I don't know what to do. My baby's 5 weeks old. And she said, well, your hormones are changing. Things are going to go all over the place. But she said, now is the time. Now is the time to start your antidepressants. And she wrote me out a script for antidepressants. And Valium. And of course, if you've watched the previous video, you know my experience with Valium. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to be my mom. I had a complete and utter mental breakdown. I feel like that broke me at the time. And I went home, my sister was there, and I was like, she's giving me Valium, she's giving me antidepressants. I'm just not coping. It's not my zinc, it's not my whatever, the fact that I got my period, it's like I'm just not coping. And my sister did say, you know, maybe can you just write it out? She did sort of try and encourage me not to just go into the antidepressants realm. And what else can we do? There's got to be something else. But at the time, I wasn't coping. And then I'd given my power away completely to my GP and realized that, no, that's right. I'm not coping. I'm not doing it. I'm falling apart. I'm losing my mind. And decided that was just how it was going to be. And started taking the antidepressants. It made everything worse, which they say that they do, that, you know, they tell you this straight up. I do remember actually as I was leaving, she said, this might make things worse for a week or so, but then it'll get better. And I was like, okay, I trust you because I don't trust myself right now. So I took the antidepressants for about 3 weeks, and then I had the deep feeling that something was wrong. Because while it seemed to bring down my anxiety, the buzzing was still there. While I was able to kind of get a little bit more rest at night after the first week the first week was awful. But anyway, the next 2 weeks I was like, I can see how this works. My brain is kind of a bit numb. I can sort of put my head down and have a little bit of a sleep, but my brain's still buzzing. I'm still not right. So I was able to finally get back to my GP that was an hour away, and I went and visited him, and he said, yeah, I think this is, if you're, and this was, by this stage I had 2 periods, so it was 8 weeks, my baby was 8 weeks old, and I'd started to take myself off the antidepressant. And I had found a naturopath who worked for one of the doctors who worked with women who suffered from postnatal depletion. So I was able to sort of try to build my village here. Went back to my doctor and he said, yeah, this is probably hormonal. So the antidepressants aren't going to help you overall in the grand scheme of things. They might take the edge off, but it might not be the solution for you. You need to be able to start to take records of if this is happening more at times, like do you feel these sensations more right before you start to bleed, or is it just all the time? You need to sort of go back and document a little bit more and then come back to me. And I thought this was very valid, but this gave me hope. This just gave me hope. Nothing was really different, except that I had hope that things didn't have to be as bad as they were. So I was seeing this naturopath who had supported people in coming off antidepressants before. So she was giving me lots of vitamin C and different kinds of compounds that was going to help my brain to just recalibrate from that experience. And she started to give me some hormone supportive supplements. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but then I had my zinc levels checked, and of course they were ridiculously low. So I started taking the zinc, and when I had about 3 weeks off the antidepressant and the zinc had kicked in, that's when I started to feel somewhat normal. I felt that the buzzing had kind of gone, and I was taking these hormone supporting herbs. Because things were going well, I stuck with it, and I decided that I was just going to keep going. Continued to breastfeed my baby the whole time, continued to just focus on dialing down my nervous system, because I realized that that was the crux, that if my nervous system was fully dialed up, my hormones were going to be out of control, because what the antidepressant did was dial down my nervous system for me. But while the buzzing was still there, I was able to cope, right? So this made me just start to think about, again, how is the psychology supporting our biology? So this was a process, and I guess in the first 6 months, it was very rough, and my period kept coming, and it was very clear while I was documenting what was happening. About 3 or 4 days before I would start to bleed, I would have to a lesser extent, a panic attack, or I'd have this anxiety that would come up and come into my whole entire body and set me on fire. And I wasn't able to sleep, and I wasn't able to function. And I had the buzzing, that under the fluorescent light, or the finger stuck in a PowerPoint type feeling. But then 3 or 4 days later, I would bleed, and then it would lessen. And with each period, it got less and less. And I realized, kind of a bit too late, maybe, or maybe it was perfect for me, that my nervous system and my hormones needed to work together. How was I going to support them in the best way? Perhaps in the early days, it might have been helpful to have taken hormone replacement therapy instead of antidepressants to help level that out. But I still needed to dial down my nervous system for my hormones to be able to respond. They're just both working together all the time, synchronicity. So this was really the beginning of my journey. I ended up completely loving that next 6 months of my baby's life. That's, of course, when we're like, we should have more, but knowing deep on the inside that I don't think I could cope with more. Because even still now, my youngest is now 9. Even now, before my period, 3 or 4 days before my period, I have a very restless sleep. I'm a bit more agitated. I'm a bit more anxious. I'm a bit more on edge, and find that as soon as I start to bleed, it all goes away, so there's definitely a basis for what my nervous system is doing as to how that shows up for me. So if I'm stressed, if I'm not being the person that's authentic to myself and being the person I want to be, or showing up as my best self, if I'm highly emotional, if I'm drinking, and I don't drink coffee now, but sometimes I drink green tea, sometimes I drink mate, sometimes I eat lots of chocolate, cacao, drinking cacao, which has got lots of caffeine in it too. Sometimes I do indulge in those things. If I do it too often or too much, and then roll and race according to my nervous system, trying to keep up with what's happening inside of my head, my body feels it, and that premenstrual period is very, very rough. There is actually a word for it now. I've found out, I think my youngest was maybe 4 or 5, and I came across the term premenstrual dysphoria disorder that I quite probably most likely had before my babies, but in the research that I was looking at, it can be triggered to increase. It can also be triggered for the first time postnatally. So in some ways, I like to be able to go, oh, this is this, and this was my experience. But at the same time, I don't want to wrap it up in a box and keep it as my own. I want to be able to say, I didn't know these things at the time. I was confused, or I didn't have enough information to actually know how to move forward. So this became my passion. How can I help mums? How can I help women to have all the information to be able to move forward and not have what feels like on the inside really traumatic, dramatic experiences that takes us a really long time to get over. It doesn't actually have to be that way. And then I had some other health issues along the way, but to wrap this up nicely and bring it full circle, I think my youngest was about 5 and I came across Dr. Paul Jenkins because around this time I'd hit my rock bottom. Now go back to some of the other videos, the power of positivity. I'm trying to think of some of the first videos, even the why you feel terrible. I've shared in depth and detail my rock bottom. So even though those 2 postnatal experiences were really hard, I remember thinking that I was using them as fuel to become a better person. Again, back to my first part 1 of my story, is that there was something inside me that felt like, no, let's do this. Let's go forward. Let's make this something that we can use to move into the next version of ourselves and become better at who we are. And I've got this, I can keep going. Even with the uncertainty and the doubt and the anxiety, there was a spirit there that was pushing me forward. I got to my rock bottom. I think my son was 4 or 5. And I dropped them off somewhere and I was in the garage. I've told this story so many times that that was the moment I was so tired but wired. I was premenstrual. I was in that buzzy phase. I was feeling anxious. I was thinking that things were starting to really shift in our marriage. Parenting was hard. My job was so dissatisfying. You know, when you just have those moments where you're just wondering, what's the point? Like, what am I here? Is this it? Is this all I'm moving toward? Like, is this it? And I just spoken to a friend who had said, well, you know, we're in perimenopause now, right? You just have to surrender for the next 10 years. You've got no control. Your hormones will take over. You just have to surrender, and you just have to hope that you won't be too traumatized throughout the experience and you'll get through to the other side. You will be okay, but you just have to ride the wave. And the way that I describe how I was feeling when I got home was that my internal pilot light, that fire that kept me going, that I've got this, we can get through, just went out. And it was gone. I felt like I'd fallen into this hole of depression. And I thought, what is the point if our hormones really are that much in control? What is the point? I don't like to use the word suicidal because it's not true, in the way that wanting to end my life as an actual event, but really wondering why the heck I was here. Really wondering. It was a terrible feeling. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling where you felt so disconnected, so disempowered, so disillusioned. And that's how I was feeling. And the next moment, Dr. Paul Jenkins came into my life through my husband, who was looking at parenting videos to help us figure out how we were going to navigate some of these challenges with the 2 boys. And he said, I found this guy. Let's watch some of his videos. And so we started watching the videos and I was like, oh, this guy's onto something. I really like what he's saying. Then I came across a video of his about marriage and about your relationship. And I watched that and I implemented one thing from his video that made a massive impact. And I've talked about that in other videos. I'm sure there's another one called Marriage Mayhem, or How to Save Your Marriage and How to Not Experience Mayhem in Your Marriage. There's a couple of videos there because I implemented the work of Dr. Paul and had amazing experiences myself and thought, this guy's definitely onto something. Became fully obsessed with his work. And his work is all about psychology. He's a positivity psychologist, clinical psychologist, but he trains people in positive psychology principles to use them in a coaching setting, to be able to help coach and counsel people through their experiences. And so I became completely obsessed with him and his work, joined up for his training, did his courses, did a certification program, and at the same time was researching more and more about women's health, did some more women's postgraduate certificates and reproductive and sexual health, and then realized, for me, I had this moment of, it's our psychology that can support our biology, even though there's elements of our biology that we can't control. Our psychology can control how we choose to experience it. And this has become my life's work. This is why I'm here. This is why I shout this from the rooftops. This is why I felt the need to tell you my story. Because now that's what I do. I cracked the code for myself. I created something which, again, you can go back and see in the other videos, a process called the positive energy circuit that is a workout for your mind and your emotions that if you do over and over and over again, you get stronger within your mind and your spirit, and that will help you face any adversity, anything happening hormonally, any pathological issue happening, any disease, any sickness, any issue that's happening that you can't control. You can actually have an incredible, life-changing, transformative experience if your psychology is in the right place and supporting what's happening in your biology. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I feel like they're miracles. People who have come to me with polycystic ovarian syndrome, with the most terrible symptoms ever, that have gone down to a whisper. People who have been suffering so badly with cancer, and then the cancer either disappearing completely or the symptoms disappearing completely, and they've been able to still heal and then find other ways to provide support throughout that process. People who have had broken marriages and been able to heal them. People who have had broken marriages and not been able to heal them, but then been able to heal themselves. People who feel like they just can't be the parent that they want to be and do feel like they have suicidal tendencies, that want to exit this world, but then realize that there's more to it than they're looking at. There's more. They've got the perspective is just a subtle shift north in your perspective can make the biggest difference into the whole meaning of your life. Like, it sounds dramatic and grandiose, but it's not. And actually, I've said that out loud once to Dr. Paul when we were having an interview. If you go back and you can see my interview with Dr. Paul in the Tuesday chats. And I said, oh my God, it sounds dramatic. And he said, but no, it's not if we're doing it. And this is how we change the world, just one thought at a time. And the way that we do that is by understanding that our thoughts create our feelings. Our feelings tell our body what to do, and that becomes how we experience anything that happens in our lives. And that is all in the context of previous videos that I've been putting out here with this positive energy recharge to recharge you in a positive way, because it changes you from the inside. It shifts your body chemistry and your biology and shifts your cells just by using your mind in the right way. And that is why I'm here. And perhaps it does feel dramatic to me because it reminds me of my acting days when I would stand up on the stage and I would declare whatever it is my character was going through, the loss of love, the loss of life, the loss of whatever the transformation was for my character. Now, the transformation is myself on a daily basis, the transformation for my clients on a daily basis, and I get a little piece of that transformation each time one of you has a shift. And then from someone just simply watching videos like this, or sometimes I actually do upload the coaching and the questions. All of my social media is full of questions that people have asked me. And I take them through the positivity principles. Just from watching other people's experiences, you can also change your life. It is incredible how the ripple effect impacts us in a way we can't even understand. But we know because we feel it on the inside, and then we take that into our families and our workplaces and our environments. We've got to keep going. You have to keep going. And I'm going to keep going, although right now I'm going to stop. Stop with this video. That is really to wrap up the part 2 of the whole reason why I wanted to share my story. And I hope, again, this has been helpful and enlightening and given you some kind of help to reignite your pilot light, because that's what I needed to do to get to this place, to be able to help you do the same thing for yourself and for other people around you and in your life. And I hope that I've been able to do that and continue to do so. Please feel free to leave any wins or transformations or any little bits of gold that you find in the comments. Let me know how this is resonating for you. I'm going to very soon start a new series. It's going to be a little bit more intentional, a little bit less free and talking unscripted in a way that can sometimes feel a bit clunky and possibly go off on tangents, which I think is okay in many ways, because you guys are getting to know me in this process too. But I have so much more in store for you. So I hope that you can go forth, have a beautiful day, own your path, create your peace. And I'll see you in the next video.